My name is Simone Carter, and 5 years after my ex-husband's family threw me out with my newborn daughter in my arms, they invited me back to celebrate his engagement to another woman. They thought I was still broke. They thought I was still ashamed. They thought I would walk into that private Dallas dinner wearing something cheap, sitting quietly at the far end of the table while they smiled at each other and reminded me exactly where they believed I belonged. But what they did not know was that the woman they once mocked as a desperate single mother selling vegetables online had spent 5 years building the most powerful agricultural logistics AI platform in the South. And before that engagement dinner ended, every person in that room would understand one thing clearly. I was not the embarrassment they invited. I was the reckoning they never saw coming. To understand why I accepted that invitation instead of throwing it straight into the trash, you have to understand what happened 5 years earlier. I was 29 years old, 6 weeks postpartum, barely sleeping, and holding my baby daughter Lila against my chest inside Adrian Whitaker's sunroom in Highland Park. Adrian was my mother-in-law then, a woman who wore pearls in the afternoon and judgment like perfume. Her house was all white furniture, polished marble, and quiet cruelty. My husband Marcus sat beside me with his hands folded between his knees, staring at the floor like a man waiting for a sentence. He had lost his job at a private equity firm 2 weeks earlier, and our savings were almost gone. Lila's medical bills were stacked on our kitchen counter. Rent was overdue. My small company, Green Route, was still alive, but barely. I had built software that helped small farms predict grocery demand and route fresh produce directly to local stores before anything spoiled. It was not glamorous, but it worked. Farmers were using it. Local grocers were asking for it. I needed $15,000 to keep the servers running, cover compliance tools, and survive long enough for the first paid contracts to come through. I did not want to ask Adrian for help. Every instinct in my body told me not to. But Marcus said she was family. Marcus said she would never let her granddaughter suffer. Marcus was wrong. Adrian listened to him explain our situation without blinking. Then she set her teacup down and looked directly at me. So my son loses his income, my granddaughter needs stability, and your solution is to ask this family to fund your little farm app? I swallowed the humiliation rising in my throat. Green Route is not a farm app. It is a logistics platform. 32 farms are already testing it, and 4 grocery cooperatives are waiting for full launch. A soft laugh came from the chair near the window. Brielle, Marcus's younger sister, leaned back with one manicured hand resting on her diamond bracelet. She was 31, beautiful, spoiled, and engaged to Calvin Rhodes, a real estate heir who treated Dallas like something his family had personally invented. "Simone," she said sweetly, "you are helping farmers sell tomatoes. Please do not say logistics platform like you are running a global company." Marcus finally looked up. "Brielle, don't." But his voice had no spine in it. Brielle smiled because she heard the weakness too. "What? We are all adults here. She just had a baby. You are unemployed. And instead of getting a real job, she wants mom to throw money into some little rural delivery fantasy because she likes calling herself a founder." Adrian sighed as if Brielle had been harsh but truthful. "Motherhood requires sacrifice, Simone. A responsible woman understands when her dreams are hurting her family." I held Lila closer. "My dream is for my family." Brielle rolled her eyes. "No, your dream is for your ego." The words hit me, but what hurt more was Marcus's silence. I looked at him, waiting for him to say that Green Root was mine, that I had coded through pregnancy, that I had taken calls from farmers while swollen and sick and still kept building. He did not say any of that. Adrian opened a folder beside her chair and slid it across the glass table. "I am willing to help Marcus and Lila," she said, "but I will not finance delusion. If you want money from this family, you will shut down Green Root today, transfer the code and assets to Marcus, and find stable employment." I stared at the papers. "Asset transfer documents. Already prepared. You want me to sign over my company?" "I want you to grow up," Adrian said coldly. Brielle picked up the pen and held it toward me with a little smile. "Be smart for once." I looked at Marcus. He would not meet my eyes. That was the moment I understood this meeting had never been about helping us. It was an execution, and my husband had brought me there willingly. I stood slowly, my body still aching from childbirth, my daughter asleep against my shoulder. No, Adrian's face hardened. Then you get nothing. I understand. Marcus stood too, panic finally entering his voice. Simone, don't do this. I turned toward him. Don't do what? Refuse to hand my future to people who despise me? He lowered his voice. We need them. I looked at the man I had married and realized he had already chosen. You need them, I said. I need myself. Brielle stepped into my path as I moved toward the door. Walk out now, and do not come crawling back when that baby needs formula. I looked her dead in the eyes. My daughter will never crawl to anyone. Then I walked out of Adrian Whitaker's sunroom with no money, no support, no husband beside me, and only $47 in my checking account. Marcus did not follow me. That night, I took Lila to a motel off Interstate 35 because I could not bear going back to the apartment where my marriage had just died. I sat on the edge of the bed under a flickering yellow lamp, feeding my daughter from a bottle with one hand and checking overdue server invoices with the other. Green Route had 9 days left before shutdown. 9 days before everything I had built disappeared. I looked down at Lila's tiny face and whispered, I don't know how yet, baby, but I swear we are not staying here. The next morning, I sold my wedding ring. It bought 26 more days of server time, 2 cans of formula, and enough gas to drive to 3 farms outside Weatherford that had agreed to test my system if I came in person. I drove through brutal Texas heat with broken air conditioning, sweat running down my back, Lila crying in the rear seat, and a kind of fury in my chest that felt almost holy. Adrian thought she had cut me off. Brielle thought she had buried me. Marcus thought fear would send me crawling back. They were all wrong. They had not destroyed me. They had removed every illusion I still had about them. And when illusions die, focus is born. For the next 5 years, I built Green Route in silence. I slept in borrowed rooms, church basements, and eventually a one-bedroom apartment above a closed laundromat that smelled like dust and old detergent. I coded while Lila slept on my chest. I took sales calls from parking lots. I drove farm roads before sunrise, teaching growers twice my age how to use a tablet interface while holding my daughter's snack cup in the other hand. I learned procurement law, refrigerated transport standards, grocery margin structures, crop loss cycles, and investor psychology. Venture firms rejected me so many times that the word no stopped sounding like failure and started sounding like background noise. Then, in year 3, a brutal drought hit Central Texas, and Green Route predicted supply gaps 9 days before the major distributors saw them coming. Stores using my system kept produce on their shelves, while competitors lost millions in spoilage and emergency freight. A regional grocery CEO went on television and said one sentence that changed my life forever. The only reason we survived the supply shock was Simone Carter's platform. Within 48 hours, my inbox exploded. Farmers, grocers, school districts, hospital food suppliers, restaurant groups. Then came the investors who had ignored me. Then came the corporations. I did not sell immediately. I scaled. I hired carefully. I gave equity to the engineers who believed before the headlines. I bought my mother a house in San Antonio and moved Lila into a safe neighborhood with sunflowers in the backyard. I stayed private because poverty had taught me the value of silence, and wealth taught me the danger of attention. By the end of year 5, Green Route was no longer a startup. It was the invisible nervous system moving fresh food across half the Southwest. Then North Star Dominion offered to acquire us for $480 million, plus retained equity and a board seat that gave me oversight of distressed agricultural and retail infrastructure assets across Texas. I negotiated for 21 brutal days. When the deal closed, I did not post about it. I did not call Adrian. I did not send Brielle a screenshot. I took Lila for ice cream, tucked her into bed, sat alone in my kitchen, and cried until I could breathe again. 2 weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at my office. Heavy paper. Gold lettering. Brielle Whitaker and Calvin Rhodes cordially invite you to an intimate engagement dinner celebrating family, legacy, and new beginnings. I stared at the invitation for a long time. Brielle had not spoken to me in 5 years. Adrian had never sent Lila a birthday card. Marcus had turned fatherhood into occasional supervised visits and late child support payments. So why now? The answer arrived 3 minutes later when my assistant placed a financial briefing on my desk. Calvin Rhodes, Brielle's fiancé, was drowning in debt. His family's real estate empire had over-leveraged itself on luxury retail properties, and the private lender holding their most dangerous note had just been acquired by North Star Dominion. My company did not just sell to North Star. My board seat gave me direct authority over the restructuring committee that would decide whether Calvin's family survived or collapsed. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the invitation again. They had no idea. They were not inviting Simone Carter, the woman with power over their financial future. They were inviting the poor ex-wife they planned to humiliate one last time. I smiled slowly. Not because I was happy, because the universe had just handed me a dinner reservation to justice. On the night of the engagement dinner, I dressed simply. No logos, no diamonds, just a cream silk dress, a camel coat, and the quiet confidence of a woman who could buy the restaurant, the street it sat on, and half the men inside without making a phone call. I left Lila safely with my mother, kissed her forehead, and drove myself to the private dining club in downtown Dallas where Calvin and Brielle were hosting their celebration. When I stepped into the room, every conversation paused for half a breath. Adrian saw me first. She looked older, sharper, still polished, still cold. Marcus stood beside her in a tailored suit he had not paid for, his smile stiffening when our eyes met. Brielle glittered near the center of the room in a silver dress, one hand resting possessively on Calvin's arm. She looked me up and down, noticed the absence of visible labels, and smiled exactly the way she had smiled in that sunroom 5 years earlier. "Simone," she called loudly. "You actually came. I was worried the valet might make you nervous." A few people laughed. Marcus looked away. Adrian lifted her champagne glass and gave me a thin smile. I walked toward them slowly, feeling no shame, no fear, and no need to explain the woman I had become. Brielle leaned in and kissed the air beside my cheek. "You look simple," she whispered. "Very brave choice for a night like this." I smiled back. "You look expensive. That must have taken effort." Her smile flickered, but only for a second. Calvin extended his hand, barely interested. "Good to finally meet Marcus's ex." "Good to meet you too," I said. His grip was soft, his watch was loud, and his confidence was borrowed. Dinner began 20 minutes later. I was seated at the far end of the table near the kitchen doors. Naturally, Brielle made sure everyone heard about Calvin's ranch properties, retail centers, family connections, and the custom house they were renovating in Preston Hollow. Adrian praised Brielle's elegance. Marcus laughed too loudly at Calvin's jokes. Nobody asked about Lila until dessert, and even then Adrian only said, "I assume the child is healthy." The child, not my granddaughter, not Lila. The child. I set down my spoon. "She is wonderful." Brielle tilted her head. "Still doing that little school lunch charity thing, Simone?" I smiled. "Something like that." "That is sweet," she said, with the kind of pity rich women use when they mean useless. "Not everyone is built for real scale. Some people are meant for small local projects, and that is okay." Calvin chuckled. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Adrian did not correct her. Brielle leaned closer. "I hope you found your lane after everything. It must have been hard raising Lila alone after your business situation failed." There it was. The opening. The same old assumption wrapped in silk. I looked down the table at Marcus, then at Adrian, then finally at Brielle. My business situation worked out fine. Brielle laughed softly. "Simone, you do not have to perform here. We are family." "No," I said quietly. "We are not." The table went silent. Brielle blinked. Adrian's smile vanished. Calvin leaned back, amused. "Well," he said, "this just became interesting." Brielle recovered quickly, lifting her champagne glass. "Then tell us, how is the little vegetable delivery thing?" I smiled. "I sold it." For 1 second, nobody reacted. Then Brielle covered her mouth with theatrical sympathy. "Oh, Simone, I am so sorry. Was it bankruptcy or one of those tiny asset sales? Calvin smirked. Happens all the time. Small founders get emotional and overestimate the market. Adrian sighed. At least now you can focus on stable work. I let the silence stretch. Then I looked directly at Brielle and said, I sold Greenroot for $480 million. Calvin's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Marcus turned white. Brielle stared at me like I had spoken in another language. Adrian's hand tightened around her napkin. Then Calvin laughed. Loudly. Cruelly. That is adorable. He pulled out his phone. Let us not embarrass ourselves with fantasy numbers. He typed quickly. I watched his expression change as the search results loaded. First confusion, then disbelief, then something much better. Fear. His eyes moved across the screen, reading the acquisition announcement, the North Star Dominion press release, my board appointment, my retained equity position, and the committee assignment that placed me directly over distressed agricultural and retail infrastructure assets across Texas. His hand began to tremble. Brielle whispered, Calvin, what is it? He did not answer. The phone slipped slightly in his hand. I leaned back in my chair and smiled because he had just realized the poor woman his fiancé invited to humiliate was the same woman scheduled to decide the fate of the Rhodes family dead at 9 Monday morning. Calvin Rhodes did not move for several seconds. His phone remained in his trembling hand, the blue light from the screen reflecting across his face, as if the device itself had become a weapon pointed directly at his throat. Around the table, everyone waited for him to laugh again, to dismiss me, to explain that the article was fake or exaggerated or somehow irrelevant. But he did not laugh. He did not speak. He simply stared at the screen while the confidence drained out of him one shade at a time. Brielle's smile began to collapse. Calvin, she whispered, sharper now. What does it say? He swallowed hard but still said nothing. Marcus leaned forward, his face pale, his eyes locked on me as though he was seeing a stranger wearing his ex-wife's face. Adrian's posture stiffened, that old aristocratic mask fighting desperately to stay in place, while panic started moving behind her eyes. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip, letting the silence punish them longer than any speech could. Brielle finally snatched the phone from Calvin's hand. Give me that, she hissed. Her eyes scanned the screen quickly, impatiently, still expecting to find proof of my humiliation. Instead, she found Forbes, she found North Star Dominion, she found Green Route. She found my face beside words like historic acquisition, retained equity, board oversight, agricultural infrastructure, and $480 million. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time since I had known her, Brielle Whitaker looked genuinely small. Calvin reached for his phone, but she pulled it away, scrolling frantically as if another article might contradict the first one. It did not. There were business journals, regional news features, investor briefings, market analysis reports, and a photograph from the acquisition signing where I stood beside North Star's CEO in a simple black suit, looking calm, rested, and completely untouchable. The phone slipped from Brielle's fingers and landed face up on the white tablecloth. My own image stared back at all of them from between the crystal glasses and gold-rimmed plates. The elderly aunt beside me leaned over, squinted at the screen, and gasped softly. Oh my lord. That was when the table changed. Not loudly, not all at once. But every person there understood that a hierarchy had been violently rearranged in front of them. The poor ex-wife was not poor. The failed founder had not failed. The woman seated near the kitchen doors was not there because she belonged at the bottom of the table. She had been placed there by people too arrogant to recognize power unless it arrived covered in logos. Adrian recovered first, because women like Adrian survive by changing masks faster than ordinary people change expressions. Her cold mouth softened. Her shoulders relaxed. A trembling smile spread across her face as if pride had been there all along and only needed permission to appear. Simone, she breathed, pressing one hand to her chest. Why didn't you tell us? I turned my head slowly toward her. You didn't ask. The words landed gently, but they cut deep. Adrian's smile tightened. Well, we would have loved to celebrate this incredible achievement. You know that. I looked at her until she blinked. No, Adrian. I know the opposite. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and unsteady. Simone, is this real? I looked at him. 5 years ago, I had begged that man with my eyes to stand beside me in his mother's sunroom. He had chosen the floor instead. Now he was staring at me like a man who had walked away from a locked door and just learned it led to a palace. Yes, I said. It is real. His throat worked painfully. You never told me. You never called to ask how I was building it. He flinched. That one hurt him, and I was glad. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because truth should hurt the people who spent years avoiding it. Brielle suddenly pushed back her chair with a sharp scrape. This is ridiculous, she snapped, though her voice shook. Money does not erase history. I almost smiled. You're right. It doesn't. She froze, unprepared for agreement. I leaned forward slightly. That is why I remember every word you said to me in Adrian's sunroom. Her cheeks flushed. People say things during stressful moments. You told me my daughter would need formula, and I would come crawling back. The room went silent again. Brielle glanced toward Calvin, but he was still staring at the phone like it contained his death certificate. Adrian intervened quickly. Simone, surely we are not going to revisit old misunderstandings during Brielle's engagement dinner. Misunderstanding? I repeated softly. You prepared legal papers to take my company while I was 6 weeks postpartum. A man near Calvin's side of the table lowered his wine glass slowly. Someone else whispered, What? Adrian's face hardened for half a second before she remembered who I was now. That is not a fair characterization. It is the cleanest version of what happened. Marcus closed his eyes. Brielle folded her arms, trying desperately to look offended instead of frightened. Nobody tried to take anything from you. We tried to help you face reality. I nodded. And now reality is sitting at your table. Calvin finally found his voice. It came out rough and lower than before. You are on the North Star Restructuring Committee? I turned to him. Yes. For all distressed regional assets? That is the current assignment. He stared at me as though every syllable had tightened a rope around his neck. Brielle looked between us, panic sharpening her tone. Calvin, why does that matter? He did not answer her. His eyes stayed on me. How much do you know about Rhodes Retail Group? I gave him a calm smile. Enough. The word emptied the room of air. Calvin's fingers curled into a fist against the tablecloth. That information is confidential. So is the briefing I received as a North Star board member. His jaw tightened. Then you know there are several restructuring options. I know there is a bailout option, a forced sale option, and a foreclosure option. Brielle gripped the back of her chair. Foreclosure? Adrian's eyes widened. Calvin? He shot them both a furious look, silently ordering them to stop talking. But the damage was already done. The guests had heard enough to understand that the Rhodes fortune was not as solid as the engagement dinner decorations suggested. The custom house, the ranch properties, the political confidence, the expensive champagne, all of it suddenly looked less like wealth and more like theater. Marcus looked almost dizzy. Brielle, he said quietly, did you know Calvin's family was in trouble? Brielle snapped. Of course not. Calvin's face darkened. My family is not in trouble. I tilted my head. Then Monday's meeting should be very easy for you. He stared at me, hatred and fear mixing behind his eyes. You cannot use a personal grudge to influence a corporate decision. I won't, I said. That is what makes this so uncomfortable for you. I do not need revenge to ruin you. The numbers are already doing that. A soft gasp moved down the table. Calvin stood abruptly. May I speak with you privately? Brielle grabbed his arm. Why do you need to speak with her privately? He pulled away without looking at her. That tiny public rejection did more to wound Brielle than anything I could have said. Simone, he said tightly. A moment. I looked at him, then at Adrian, then at Marcus, then at Brielle. They all looked different now, less polished, less certain, less safe inside their own story. No, I said. Calvin blinked. Excuse me? Whatever you want to say to me can be said here. You were comfortable humiliating me publicly. I am comfortable letting you negotiate publicly. His face flushed. Adrian whispered, Simone, please. I turned toward her. That word sounds strange coming from you. She lowered her eyes, but only briefly. Brielle's voice cracked through the tension. This is my engagement dinner. I looked at her. Yes. And you invited me. She looked like she wanted to scream. Because Mom said it would be mature. No, I said. You invited me because you wanted an audience for my failure. Her mouth opened, then closed. Calvin placed both palms on the table and leaned toward me. North Star does not want a public fight with Rhodes. I held his gaze. North Star wants profitable assets and clean books. We have both. No, Calvin. You have overvalued retail centers, concealed tenant defaults, unpaid contractor liens, and a ranch portfolio leveraged so aggressively that one bad quarter could pull the whole structure down. Brielle looked physically sick. Calvin, he snapped, stay out of this. The words cracked across the table. Brielle recoiled as if slapped. For the first time, she was not his adored fiancée. She was a liability making noise during a financial emergency. I watched the realization move across her face, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Calvin turned back to me. Those properties can recover. Some of them can. Then recommend extension. I will recommend whatever protects North Star. You mean whatever punishes me. I leaned back. Calvin, I did not tell you to buy dying luxury retail while pretending consumer behavior had not changed. I did not tell you to inflate occupancy reports. I did not tell you to use family land as collateral for vanity renovations. And I certainly did not tell Brielle to invite me here so she could laugh at my clothes. The silence after that was brutal. Brielle's eyes filled with tears, but not the humble kind. These were furious tears, humiliated tears, the tears of a woman who had spent her whole life believing beauty and status were shields, only to discover they were decorations. Marcus suddenly stood. I need some air. Adrian grabbed his wrist. Sit down. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Something shifted in him. Not courage exactly, more like the delayed arrival of shame. No, he said quietly. Adrian released him as if burned. Marcus looked at me. I should have followed you that day. The room froze. Brielle whispered, Marcus, don't. But he kept looking at me. I should have walked out with you and Lila. I knew it then. I knew it when you reached the door. I knew if I stayed, something in me would never be clean again. My chest tightened unexpectedly. I had imagined hearing an apology from Marcus many times over the years. In those fantasies, I was always colder, stronger, untouched. But real pain does not care how wealthy you become. It still knows where it lives. Then why didn't you? I asked. His eyes turned wet. Because I was weak. Adrian's face crumpled with outrage. Marcus Whitaker, you will not disgrace this family in front of guests. He turned on her slowly. You disgraced this family when you made my wife beg for basic kindness with our newborn in her arms. A stunned silence fell. Brielle looked horrified. Adrian looked betrayed. Calvin looked annoyed that anyone was discussing emotions while his empire was bleeding out on the table. I looked at Marcus and saw something I had not seen in years. Not the man I married. Not fully. But perhaps the outline of a man who had finally become tired of being owned. Then the private dining room doors opened. A server stepped inside, but he was not carrying food. He carried a black leather folder and looked directly at Calvin. Mr. Rhodes, he said nervously, there are two gentlemen at the front asking for you. Calvin's face tightened. Not now. The server swallowed. They said it is urgent. Who are they? The server looked around the room, clearly uncomfortable. They said they are from North Star Dominion's Legal Compliance Division. Every head turned toward me. I did not move. Calvin's face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment anymore. Brielle whispered, Why would North Star Legal be here? Calvin stared at me, and for the first time that night, he looked truly afraid. I slowly placed my napkin beside my plate and smiled because I had not invited North Star Legal, which meant someone inside Calvin's own family had decided to stop protecting him. The words North Star Dominion's Legal Compliance Division moved through the private dining room like a cold wind. Calvin Rhodes stood so still that even the candlelight seemed to hesitate around him. Brielle looked from Calvin to me, then back to the server, her face caught somewhere between confusion and panic. Adrian's fingers tightened around her champagne flute until I thought the crystal might crack. Marcus remained standing near his chair, still pale from the confession he had made seconds earlier, but now his attention was locked on Calvin with a dawning realization that this dinner had been rotten long before I walked through the door. "Tell them to wait," Calvin said, his voice low and dangerous. The server did not move. "Sir, they said they cannot wait." Calvin's jaw flexed. "This is a private family event." I almost smiled at that. For 5 years, these people had used the word family like a locked gate. Now Calvin was trying to use it as a shield. The server glanced toward the hallway, then lowered his voice. "They are with 2 federal marshals." The dining room went silent so quickly I could hear the faint crackle of the fireplace behind Brielle's chair. Federal marshals. That was not a routine legal inquiry. That was not a compliance memo. That was a blade entering the room before anyone had seen the hand holding it. Calvin's face lost the last trace of color. Brielle grabbed his sleeve. "Calvin, what is happening?" He yanked his arm away, not violently, but sharply enough that everyone noticed. "Nothing is happening." I leaned back in my chair. That answer does not sound very reassuring. His eyes snapped toward me. "You did this." "No," I said calmly. "I did not." "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to understand that if I had sent North Star Legal after you, I would not look surprised." He stared at me, searching my face for a lie, but there was nothing for him to find. I truly had not arranged this. That made the situation much more interesting. Adrian slowly stood, every inch of her posture fighting to regain the social control she had lost. "Calvin, perhaps you should step outside and handle this discreetly. There is no need to alarm everyone." "Everyone is already alarmed," Marcus said quietly. Adrian turned on him. "You have said quite enough tonight." For the first time in my life, Marcus did not fold. "No, Mother. I have barely started." Brielle slapped both hands against the table. "Can we please not make this about Marcus's little guilt crisis right now? My fiancé has federal marshals at our engagement dinner." She said it like the marshals were rude guests who had failed to RSVP. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Calvin took a slow breath and buttoned his suit jacket, trying to rebuild himself into the confident air he had been only minutes earlier. "Fine. I will speak to them in the foyer." The server shifted uncomfortably. "They specifically asked to speak to you here." Calvin froze. "Here?" "Yes, sir. In front of my guests?" The server did not answer. He did not need to. Calvin looked around the room, and for the first time, he seemed to understand that the people at this table were no longer an audience for his success. They were witnesses. 2 men in dark suits entered first, followed by a woman carrying a slim leather portfolio and 2 uniformed federal marshals who stood near the doorway without speaking. The woman was in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a clean knot and the kind of calm expression that told me she had ended powerful men's evenings before. I recognized her immediately. Denise Calloway, North Star Dominion's senior legal compliance officer. I had met her once during the acquisition transition. She was brilliant, precise, and famously uninterested in being intimidated by wealth. Her eyes found me for half a second, and her brow lifted almost imperceptibly. She had not expected me here either. Then she turned to Calvin. "Mr. Rhodes." Calvin forced a smile. "Miss Calloway, this is an unexpected intrusion." "Yes," she said. "I imagine it is." The room absorbed the cruelty of that simple response. Calvin cleared his throat. "If this concerns Monday's restructuring meeting, I am happy to discuss it during business hours." Denise opened the leather portfolio. "This does not concern Monday's meeting," Brielle whispered. "Then what does it concern?" Denise did not look at her. It concerns the emergency injunction filed this afternoon by members of the Rhodes Family Trust, alleging unauthorized collateralization of protected assets, misrepresentation of debt exposure, and attempted concealment of material liabilities connected to properties now under North Star review. Brielle's mouth fell open. Adrian inhaled sharply. Marcus looked at Calvin with open disbelief. Your own family filed against you? Calvin's polite mask cracked. My uncle is senile. Denise's eyes lifted from the folder. Your uncle attached notarized medical competency evaluations from 3 physicians. Calvin said nothing. He also attached board minutes, loan agreements, and internal correspondence, indicating that you and your father pledged restricted trust assets to secure private development loans without full trustee approval. The guests began whispering. Calvin's carefully constructed engagement dinner, designed to showcase wealth and power, was transforming into a public autopsy. Brielle stood abruptly. No, no, there must be a mistake. Calvin would never risk family assets without permission. Denise finally looked at her. Mrs. Whitaker-to-be, I cannot speak to what you were told. The title landed like a slap. Brielle was not family yet. Not legally. Not protected. Not included. Her eyes darted to Calvin. What does she mean by what I was told? Calvin's voice turned cold. Sit down, Brielle. She did not sit. Did you use trust assets for the Preston Hollow house? Silence. That was answer enough. Adrian pressed a hand to her chest. The house? Brielle's voice shook harder. Calvin. He looked at her then, and there was nothing tender in his expression. Only irritation. Do you want to have this conversation right now? Brielle stared at him as the fantasy she had built around his money began to crack. You told me that house was ours. Calvin laughed under his breath. I told you what you wanted to hear. A collective gasp moved through the room. Brielle took a step back, as if the man she planned to marry had suddenly become a stranger. I watched her, and something complicated moved through me. Brielle had been cruel to me. She had enjoyed my pain. She had stood between me and the door while I held my newborn and warned me not to come crawling back. But in that moment, seeing her realize she had been selected, polished, and displayed like another asset in Calvin's failing portfolio, I felt the faintest shadow of pity, not forgiveness. Never that. But recognition. Women like Brielle often believe proximity to powerful men makes them powerful too, until the bill comes due and they discover they were never partners. They were decorations. Denise continued, unmoved by the emotional wreckage around her. Mr. Rhodes, pursuant to the injunction, North Star Dominion is required to freeze all pending restructuring discussions involving Rhodes Retail Group until the court reviews the emergency petition. Additionally, we are obligated to secure any documentation relating to assets pledged against North Star-held notes. Calvin's hands curled into fists. You have no authority to seize anything tonight. Denise nodded toward the marshals. The court disagrees. One marshal stepped forward and handed Calvin a sealed document. He did not take it immediately. The paper hovered between them like a verdict. Finally, Calvin snatched it from his hand, tore it open, and scanned the first page. His expression shifted from fury to something uglier. Desperation. This is temporary. Denise closed her folder. Most disasters are at first. I felt Adrian looking at me, and when I turned, her expression had changed again. Not soft this time, not falsely proud, calculating. She was trying to determine whether I could still be useful, whether I could still be manipulated, whether the girl she once cornered in her sunroom had left even one emotional door unlocked. Simone, she said carefully, surely there is something you can do to prevent unnecessary damage. I looked at her. To whom? She blinked. To everyone. No, I said. You mean to you. Her face tightened. Brielle is about to marry into this family. That sounds like Brielle's problem. Brielle turned toward me, wounded pride flashing through her tears. You are enjoying this. I did not lie. Parts of it, yes. Marcus whispered my name, but I ignored him. Brielle's lips trembled. You hated me so much that you came here to watch my life fall apart. I stood slowly, Not because I needed height, but because I wanted every person at that table to hear me clearly. No, Brielle, you invited me here to watch mine. The only difference is that you were wrong about whose life was falling apart. She looked away first. Calvin suddenly stepped toward me, lowering his voice. You and I need to talk. One marshal moved slightly, reminding him to keep his distance. I looked at Calvin with calm disgust. No, we don't. You have influence at North Star. Yes, use it. Why would I? His eyes sharpened. Because if Rhodes collapses, it will not just hurt me. It will hurt employees, tenants, contractors, small investors, people who had nothing to do with what happened to you 5 years ago. That was the first intelligent thing he had said all night. And he knew it. The room shifted because Calvin had finally stopped defending his pride and started weaponizing innocent people. For a moment, I saw the real predator beneath the polished air. Not the loud man bragging over champagne. The strategist. The man who knew how to hide behind collateral damage. Adrian seized the opening immediately. He is right, Simone. You care about working people, farmers, families, communities. Surely you would not punish ordinary people because of personal pain. There it was, the trap. They were trying to turn my compassion into a leash. 5 years ago, they called my kindness weakness. Now they wanted to use it as a bailout strategy. I smiled faintly. That is exactly why North Star assigned me to the committee. Calvin frowned. What does that mean? It means I know the difference between saving people and saving the men who put them in danger. Denise Calloway's eyes flickered with approval, but she remained silent. I looked at Calvin. If Rhodes' assets can be restructured in a way that protects workers, tenants, and legitimate investors, I will support it. If the only option protects you while everyone else absorbs your consequences, I will burn the deal to the ground. Calvin stared at me, hatred simmering beneath his controlled expression. You have no idea how ruthless this world can be. I leaned closer. Calvin, I built my company as a single mother with a baby on my chest and $47 in my account. Ruthless did not scare me then. It certainly does not scare me wearing a dinner jacket. Marcus made a sound that might have been a breath, might have been regret. Brielle sank back into her chair, suddenly quiet. Adrian watched me with something close to fear now. Not because I was rich, because I was no longer emotionally reachable in the ways she once understood. Denise turned to Calvin. We will need access to your phone, your personal laptop, and any documents currently in your possession regarding the trust collateral. Calvin laughed sharply. Absolutely not. One marshal stepped forward again. Denise's voice remained calm. Refusal will be documented. Calvin looked toward the table, then toward Brielle, then toward Adrian, and finally toward Marcus, as if one of them might save him. No one moved. His world had narrowed to a phone in his pocket and the secrets it contained. Slowly, he reached inside his jacket. For 1 second, I thought he was going to hand the device over. Instead, his thumb moved quickly across the screen. Denise snapped. Stop. The marshal caught his wrist before he could finish. Calvin struggled once, then froze as the second marshal stepped in. His phone was removed from his hand and passed to Denise. She looked at the screen. Her face changed. Mr. Rhodes, she said quietly, why were you attempting to transfer $300,000 to an offshore account during an active court-ordered asset freeze? Brielle let out a strangled sound. Adrian gripped the table. Marcus whispered, Oh my God. Calvin said nothing. Denise looked at the phone again, then at him. And why is the recipient account listed under Brielle Whitaker? The room seemed to stop breathing. Brielle blinked once, then twice, as if her mind refused to process the words she had just heard. What? She whispered. Denise did not repeat herself. She simply turned the phone toward Calvin, the frozen transfer request still glowing on the screen. $300,000. Destination: Cayman International Private Holdings. Beneficiary: Brielle Whitaker. Calvin's face hardened. That transfer was never completed. Because the marshals stopped you, Denise replied evenly. Intent is still evidence. Brielle looked from the phone to Calvin, confusion rapidly giving way to anger. Why is my name on that account? Calvin exhaled slowly, as though explaining something obvious to a child. Because it was supposed to protect you. Protect me from what? He hesitated 1 second too long. From what was coming. The answer hit Brielle harder than any insult ever could. You knew? She asked, her voice cracking. You knew your company was collapsing before you proposed to me? Calvin remained silent. Answer me, she shouted. Guests at nearby tables had begun pretending not to stare, but every eye in the restaurant was now fixed on the private dining room. Calvin finally spoke. Business is complicated. Brielle laughed bitterly. That isn't an answer. It is the only one you are getting. She stepped back from him as though he carried a disease. You asked me to quit my job. Because you didn't need it. You convinced me to sell my condo. Because we were building a future together. You moved everything into your financial advisor's control. Calvin's expression never changed. Because that was more efficient. Brielle stared at him in horror. You weren't building our future. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You were hiding your past. Calvin looked away. He didn't deny it. Adrian stepped forward immediately, instinctively trying to regain control. Calvin, surely this is all a misunderstanding that can be clarified with proper documentation. Denise closed the portfolio. Mrs. Whitaker, documentation is precisely why we're here. Marcus folded his arms across his chest, his face darker than I had ever seen it. How much did you know? Calvin turned toward him sharply. Careful. Marcus shook his head. No, you be careful. Calvin took 1 step closer. Rhodes Retail Group employs over 4,000 people. If this situation becomes public, they'll suffer because people in this room cannot keep their emotions under control. I watched him carefully. He was still doing it. Still redirecting blame. Still wrapping himself in innocent employees whenever his own decisions came under attack. You keep talking about protecting other people, I said quietly. But every decision you've described protected only yourself. He looked at me with open contempt. You think you're different? I know I am. You're rich now. You sit on boards. You sign deals that affect thousands of lives. Don't pretend you're still some struggling mother sleeping in cheap motels. His words landed harder than he intended. Not because they hurt, but because they reminded me exactly who I had been. I remembered Lila asleep against my chest while I coded until sunrise. I remembered selling my wedding ring to keep servers alive for 26 more days. I remembered sitting in a grocery store parking lot counting coins before deciding whether I could afford gas or fresh fruit that week. Wealth had changed my circumstances. It had not erased those memories. You're right, I said calmly. I'm not that woman anymore. Calvin smiled triumphantly, believing he had cornered me. Exactly. Because that woman kept every promise she made to her daughter. His smile disappeared. I never became the people who tried to destroy me. Denise glanced at me briefly before returning to the documents. One of the marshals approached Calvin again. Sir, we'll need your cooperation. Calvin looked around the room one last time, searching for an ally. Adrian avoided his eyes. Brielle looked physically ill. Marcus stared at him with something close to disgust. There was no one left. Slowly, Calvin removed his watch and placed it on the table before extending both hands toward the marshal. This is unnecessary, he muttered. That depends on what happens next, the marshal replied. As the marshal guided him toward the door, Brielle suddenly called out, Wait! Everyone stopped. She walked toward Calvin slowly, tears running silently down her face. For one brief second, I thought she might hug him. Instead, she slipped the engagement ring off her finger and placed it into his palm. You didn't fall in love with me, she said softly. You recruited me. Calvin looked down at the ring without expression. You'll regret this. Brielle actually smiled through her tears. No, I already regret the part where I said yes. She turned away before he could answer. The marshals escorted Calvin from the room. Nobody spoke until the doors closed behind him. The silence that followed felt enormous. Adrian lowered herself back into her chair, as though 20 years had settled onto her shoulders in the space of 2 minutes. Marcus remained standing, staring at the empty doorway. Brielle wiped her face angrily and reached for her purse. I'm leaving. Adrian caught her wrist. Sit down. Brielle pulled free. No. Running away solves nothing. Brielle laughed bitterly. Really? That's interesting coming from you. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. Why? Brielle shot back. Because you're my mother? You haven't acted like one tonight. You've spent the entire evening trying to protect whichever person had the most money. Adrian's face flushed. Everything I ever did was to protect this family. Brielle shook her head slowly. No, you protected the family name. There's a difference. Marcus looked at his sister in surprise. It was the first honest thing she had said all night. She turned toward me unexpectedly. Simone. I met her eyes but said nothing. I hated you. Her confession hung in the air. I thought if everyone looked down on you, nobody would notice how terrified I was of never being enough. Adrian stood abruptly. Brielle. No, Mom. Brielle's voice became steadier. I'm done pretending. She looked back at me. You built something. I spent years trying to marry something. I could hear genuine shame in her voice now, but shame alone did not erase history. That realization belongs to you, I said quietly. Not to me, she nodded slowly. I know. Without another word, she walked out of the dining room alone. Marcus watched her leave before turning toward our mother. Adrian remained perfectly still, but I could see the calculation returning behind her eyes. She had already begun searching for the next version of reality she could survive. Simone, she said carefully, whatever happened tonight, we cannot change the past. No, I replied, we can't, but perhaps we can start over. I almost laughed. Start over? For Lila's sake. There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. A negotiation. She still believed relationships existed to preserve access. You haven't asked about Lila in 5 years, I reminded her. I assumed you wanted distance. Now to moo. You assumed convenience. Her lips tightened. People make mistakes. People do. Surely forgiveness matters. I looked at her for a long moment. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. Marcus lowered his head. He understood exactly what I meant. Adrian did not. She never had. She believed forgiveness automatically restored privilege. I believed forgiveness simply meant I no longer carried hatred. It did not require reopening doors that someone else had deliberately slammed shut. Denise approached me quietly after the room had begun to empty. Miss Carter. Denise. I wasn't expecting to find you here. Neither was I expecting to find federal marshals. She allowed herself the smallest smile. Life has interesting timing. Is this worse than the briefing suggested? Her expression became professional again. Much. She lowered her voice. Someone inside the Rhodes family copied internal financial records and delivered them directly to the court this afternoon. Without that whistleblower, tonight never happens. Do you know who? Not yet. I nodded slowly. Whoever it was saved a lot of innocent people. Denise closed her folder. Probably. Then she looked directly at me. Monday's restructuring meeting just became far more complicated. Because of Calvin? Because this case reaches beyond Calvin. My attention sharpened. Meaning? She hesitated. I probably shouldn't say more. You wouldn't have started if it wasn't important. Denise studied me for a moment before speaking carefully. Several wire transfers originated from accounts connected to Rhodes Retail Group. And one of those accounts appears to have received recurring payments from a charitable foundation. I frowned. What foundation? The Whitaker Family Foundation. Time seemed to slow. Adrian was speaking quietly with restaurant management near the entrance, unaware that Denise and I were watching her. That's impossible, I said. The Whitaker Foundation funds scholarships and children's hospitals. Denise's eyes remained fixed on Adrian. On paper. A cold sensation moved through my chest. Are you saying? I'm saying this investigation may not end with Calvin Rhodes. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my chief legal officer. Call me immediately. This can't wait. I stepped into the hallway and returned the call. What's wrong? There was a long pause before he answered. Simone, someone just tried to access Greenroot's archived source code repository using credentials that haven't been active in over 5 years. Every muscle in my body tightened. Whose credentials? Another pause. Marcus Whitaker. The name Marcus Whitaker hit me harder than Calvin's exposure, harder than Brielle's collapse, harder than Adrian's sudden attempt to crawl back into my daughter's life. For 5 years, Marcus had been weak. He had been absent. He had been late with child support, inconsistent with visits, and painfully skilled at apologizing only after the damage was done. But stealing from Green Route was different. Green Route was not just a company. It was the thing I had built while he stayed behind in his mother's sunroom. It was the roof over Lila's head, the engine of my freedom, the proof that I had survived every person who expected me to break. My chief legal officer, Dana Bell, remained silent on the line for 3 seconds too long. Simone, she said carefully, I need you to stay calm. I looked through the narrow hallway window back into the private dining room. Marcus was standing near the abandoned table with his head lowered, one hand pressed against the back of a chair like he was trying to keep himself upright. He did not look like a man actively committing corporate theft. But I had once believed he did not look like a man who would abandon his wife and newborn either. Tell me exactly what happened, I said. Dana exhaled. At 8:42 tonight, someone attempted to access an archived Green Route source repository through a dormant contractor portal. The credentials used were assigned to Marcus Whitaker 5 years ago. My grip tightened around the phone. Marcus never had developer access. Correct. That's why the attempt failed. Then why did he have credentials at all? Because before the divorce, he was listed as an emergency financial contact for vendor billing. The old credential set was limited, but someone tried to escalate permissions through a legacy authentication path. A cold, precise anger settled into my bones. Was anything accessed? No source code. No active systems. Nothing operational. We caught it immediately because the repository was sealed after the North Star transition. But whoever attempted it knew enough about Green Route's early architecture to target an old weakness. I kept my eyes on Marcus through the glass. Could Marcus have known that? Dana hesitated. Maybe. If he had kept old emails or documents from when you were first building. But Simone, her voice lowered. The attempt came from a device inside this building. I turned slowly, scanning the hallway, the private club entrance, the servers in white jackets moving between rooms, the polished brass elevator, the closed lounge doors. Inside this building, not from Marcus's apartment. Not from some random IP address overseas, from somewhere near me right now. Lock everything, I said. Already done. Trace the device. In progress. And Dana? Yes? Do not notify North Star yet. Another pause. Simone, if this is connected to roads, we may have mandatory disclosure obligations. I said not yet. I need 10 minutes. You have 5. I ended the call before she could argue and walked back into the dining room. The room had shifted again while I was gone. Calvin had been removed. Brielle had disappeared. Denise was speaking quietly to one of the marshals near the door. Adrian was seated again, pale but composed, already rehearsing a new face. Marcus looked up the moment I entered. Whatever he saw in my expression made his body go still. Simone? He asked. I did not answer. I walked toward him slowly, every step measured, every person in the room sensing the new danger before they understood it. Adrian straightened. What is it now? I ignored her. Marcus pushed away from the chair. Simone, what happened? I stopped in front of him. When was the last time you accessed anything related to Green Route? His face twisted in confusion. What? Answer the question. I haven't accessed anything. I wouldn't even know how. Adrian's eyes sharpened. What are you accusing him of? I kept my gaze on Marcus. Someone just tried to break into Green Route's archived source code using your old credentials. His face drained instantly. No, that is not an answer. No, Simone, I didn't do that. The desperation in his voice sounded real, but desperation had fooled me before. Your credentials were used. I don't even have those credentials. Someone does. Marcus ran both hands through his hair, suddenly looking exactly like the man in Adrian's sunroom 5 years earlier, trapped between fear and truth. I swear to you, I didn't touch your company. I would never touch Greenroot. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You were willing to let your mother take it. He flinched hard. I know. You were willing to let them erase me from it. I know. So forgive me if your word does not weigh much right now. Marcus lowered his head. I deserve that. Adrian stood abruptly. No, he does not. This is absurd. Marcus has been humiliated enough tonight. I turned toward her for the first time. Humiliation is what you call accountability when it happens to someone you love. Her mouth opened, then closed. Denise approached, alert now. Miss Carter, is there a corporate security issue? I looked at her. Possibly. Marcus stepped toward Denise. I did not do this. Denise studied him with the same calm precision she had used on Calvin. Then you will not object to handing over your phone. Marcus immediately reached into his pocket and gave it to her. No hesitation, no thumb movement, no last-second attempt to delete anything. That did not prove innocence, but it changed the shape of my suspicion. Denise passed the phone to one of her legal technicians, who had arrived with the marshals and remained near the wall. Marcus looked back at me. Simone listened to me. The only person who ever had copies of my old billing files was my mother. The room went still. Adrian's face became stone. Excuse me? Marcus turned toward her slowly. You asked me for them during the divorce. I asked for financial records. You asked for every document connected to Simone's business expenses because you said your attorney needed. Adrian lifted her chin. That was perfectly reasonable. You were dissolving a marriage. No, Marcus said, voice gaining strength. You were trying to prove Greenroot had no value, so I would not owe Simone anything. A soft murmur passed through the remaining guests. I stared at Adrian, remembering the divorce discovery process, the sudden requests for business records, the questions about whether Greenroot was a hobby, the way Marcus's attorney had tried to categorize my company as speculative, marital debt rather than an asset. At the time, I had been too exhausted and broke to understand the full strategy. Now, I understood perfectly. Adrian had not stopped trying to take Greenroute when I walked out of her sunroom. She had simply changed tactics. Did you keep those files? I asked her. Adrian looked offended. I have no idea what old divorce paperwork might still exist. Denise's technician looked up from Marcus's phone. No evidence of attempted access from this device. Marcus closed his eyes in relief. I did not. Check the building network, I said. The technician nodded and began typing. Adrian reached for her purse. This has become grotesque. I am leaving. Denise stepped into her path. Please remain available. Adrian smiled thinly. Am I being detained? Not at this time. Then move. Before Denise could respond, the technician spoke again. I have the device. Everyone turned. He looked at me first, then Denise. The attempted access came from a tablet connected to the club's guest Wi-Fi. Whose tablet? Denise asked. He frowned. Registered under the event host account. I looked toward the empty chair where Calvin had been sitting. Calvin? No, the technician said. The device name is Brielle iPad Pro, Marcus whispered. Brielle? Adrian's face flickered, just once, but I saw it. So did Denise. I turned toward the hallway. Brielle had left the room 10 minutes earlier, not to cry, not to escape humiliation. She had left with a tablet. Denise spoke sharply to the marshal near the door. Find Brielle Whitaker now. The marshal disappeared into the hallway. Adrian recovered too quickly. This is outrageous. Brielle is devastated. She is not hacking anyone's company. I stepped closer to Adrian. Then why did your face change when they said her name? My face did no such thing. You knew. I know my daughter is emotional, not criminal. No, you knew she had something of Marcus's. Adrian's silence answered for her. Marcus stared at his mother as if a final thread inside him had snapped. What did you give her? Adrian's expression hardened. I did what was necessary to protect this family. The words were so familiar, so poisonous, so perfectly Adrian that the entire room seemed to contract around them. Marcus shook his head. From what? Adrian looked at me then, and the mask fell just enough for hatred to show through. From her. I almost smiled. There it was. The truth beneath the manners. I built a company, I said. You built a threat, Adrian snapped. You walked into this family with nothing and somehow convinced my son that struggle was noble. You dragged him down, took his child, took his pride, and now you come back wearing quiet wealth and pretending you are morally superior because the market rewarded your stubbornness. Marcus stared at her. She took nothing from me. Adrian turned on him. She took you from yourself. No, he said. You did. She slapped him. The sound cracked through the dining room like breaking glass. Marcus did not move. Adrian froze, shocked by her own loss of control. For 5 years, I had carried an old version of Marcus in my mind, weak and silent in a sunroom while I walked out alone. But the man standing in front of me now slowly turned his face back toward his mother, a red mark rising along his cheek, and looked at her without fear. I am done being your excuse, he said. Denise stepped forward, but before she could speak, the marshal returned from the hallway alone. Brielle is gone. My stomach tightened. Gone where? The front desk says she left through the service exit 3 minutes ago. Denise's technician looked down at his screen. The tablet is still active, he typed quickly. It is moving. Moving? I asked. Yes. The device left the building and connected to a mobile hotspot. Denise's face sharpened. Can you track it? Already doing it. Adrian took one step backward. I saw her eyes flick toward her purse again. Marcus saw it too. Mom, he said slowly. Where would Brielle go? Adrian said nothing. Where? He demanded. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Outside the private dining club, a siren wailed faintly somewhere in downtown Dallas. The technician turned his screen toward Denise. The tablet is headed north. My phone vibrated again. Dana. I answered immediately. Tell me. Her voice was tight. The access attempt restarted from a new location. Whoever has that tablet is trying to use Marcus's old credentials again, but this time they are pairing them with scanned divorce records. My eyes locked on Adrian. What are they trying to reach? Dana inhaled. Not source code anymore. A heavy silence pressed against my ear. Then what? Your original founder agreements. I went cold. Dana continued. Simone, if those scans include early unsigned drafts, someone may be trying to fabricate an ownership dispute. The words ownership dispute struck me like a physical blow, not because I believed Brielle could actually take Green Route from me, but because I understood what she was trying to do. She did not need to win. She only needed to create enough doubt to damage the acquisition, slow the integration, trigger North Star's risk controls, and give Calvin or Adrian time to bargain from a position of chaos. 5 years ago, they tried to steal my company when it was fragile. Tonight, they were trying to poison it after it had become untouchable. Dana, I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. How much damage could a fabricated founder dispute do? She did not sugarcoat it. If filed publicly, it could freeze parts of your retained equity until the claim is dismissed. It could delay committee authority. It could trigger disclosure review. It would not destroy you, but it would create noise. Noise. That was Adrian's specialty. When she could not control truth, she manufactured noise around it until everyone became too tired to keep fighting. I looked directly at her. Your daughter is trying to forge an ownership claim against Greenroot. Adrian's face stayed still, but her eyes gave her away. That is a disgusting accusation. No, Marcus said quietly. It sounds exactly like you. She turned toward him with pure venom. You ungrateful little coward. He did not flinch this time. You kept copies of my divorce files. I kept documents that protected this family. You gave them to Brielle. I did not tell her to do anything illegal. That sentence detonated the room. Denise's eyes sharpened instantly. Mrs. Whitaker, that is a very specific denial. Adrian's lips parted, then closed. She had said too much. Marcus stared at her, devastated but no longer surprised. What did you tell her to do? Adrian's polished mask cracked under the pressure. I told her to protect herself. From Simone? From humiliation? Adrian snapped. From being publicly ruined at her own engagement dinner by a woman who has hated this family for years. I stepped closer. Brielle ruined herself when she invited me here to laugh at me. Adrian laughed bitterly. You think you are innocent? You walked in here knowing exactly what power you had over Calvin's family. Yes, you wanted this. I wanted dinner, I said. You all chose the menu. Denise turned to the technician. Where is the tablet now? He studied the screen. Still moving north. Looks like it is heading toward Highland Park. Marcus looked at Adrian. Your house. Adrian said nothing. My phone was still pressed to my ear. Dana spoke quickly. Simone, I need authorization to activate full litigation hold and notify North Star. Do it. Also, your original founder documents are safe. The signed versions are stored in 3 independent legal repositories, and the acquisition diligence packet includes certified copies. A fake claim will not survive court, but it can still cause noise. Yes. I looked toward the doorway. Then we stop the noise before it becomes a headline. Denise was already moving. We need to secure Brielle and that device. Adrian reached for her purse again, but Marcus caught her wrist. No, she glared at him. Take your hand off me. Not until you tell us where she is going. I do not answer to you. For once in your life, you will. The words came out steady, and I saw something almost like pride flicker through me against my will. Not forgiveness, not trust, but recognition. Marcus was finally standing where he should have stood 5 years ago. Late, yes, maybe too late, but standing. Adrian looked at him as if he had become a stranger. She is going home, she said coldly. She is upset. She is not some fugitive. Then why did she run through the service exit? I asked. Adrian's eyes cut to me. Because you destroyed her engagement. Calvin did that. You exposed it. Exposure is not destruction. It is light. Denise ended the debate by speaking to the marshal. We are going to the Whitaker residence. She looked to me. You should not come. I almost laughed. That is my company she is attacking. And your presence may escalate her. My absence already did. Denise held my gaze for a second, then nodded once. Stay behind us. Say nothing unless asked. Marcus stepped forward. I am coming. Adrian snapped. Absolutely not. He looked at her with a calm that seemed to frighten her more than anger would have. You lost the right to command me. Within minutes, the private club's polished silence shattered into controlled urgency. Denise's team moved through the front entrance while the marshals coordinated with local authorities. Adrian was escorted to a waiting vehicle, not in handcuffs, but not freely either. Marcus rode with Denise. I rode separately, still on the phone with Dana, watching downtown Dallas blur past the window in streaks of gold and red. My mind was not on Calvin anymore. It was not even fully on Brielle. It was on the old founder documents, the early drafts, the messy beginning, the nights when Greenroot was just code, invoices, desperation, and my name typed again and again into documents I barely understood because I could not afford the kind of lawyers who now answered my calls in seconds. Back then, Marcus had occasionally paid server bills from our joint account. He had signed one vendor form as emergency contact. He had helped with one spreadsheet before losing interest. In court, those fragments could be twisted, not successfully maybe, but loudly, and loud lies travel faster than quiet truth. Dana's voice returned. We found something else. My stomach tightened. What? Someone drafted a complaint 30 minutes ago naming Marcus Whitaker as co-founder and alleging you concealed marital assets during the divorce. I looked at the passing city lights. Who drafted it? The metadata says Whitaker Family Office. Adrian. Of course. Was it filed? Not yet. Why not? Because it is missing one thing. What? Dana paused. Marcus's digital signature. My eyes shifted to the vehicle ahead, where Marcus sat with Denise. Can they forge it? They can try. But modern court filing authentication would flag it unless they have access to his current identity credentials. A dark realization moved through me. Adrian reached for her purse twice. What is in her purse? Dana asked. I do not know. The convoy turned into Highland Park, passing manicured lawns and iron gates lit by discreet landscape lighting. Adrian's mansion appeared at the end of a curved driveway, glowing white and cold against the night sky. The same house, the same columns, the same polished front door that had once reflected my desperation back at me. But I was not that woman anymore. And this time, I was not arriving to ask for mercy. I was arriving with federal marshals. Before the vehicles fully stopped, the front door opened. Brielle stood in the doorway, barefoot. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching a tablet against her chest like a shield. For a moment, she looked less like the cruel woman from the engagement dinner and more like a terrified child caught stealing from her mother's purse. Then her eyes found me, and terror turned into rage. You! She screamed. You ruined everything. Denise stepped forward. Brielle Whitaker, put the tablet down. Brielle backed into the foyer. No, she does not get to win. She does not get to walk into my life after 5 years and take everything. Marcus climbed out of the vehicle. Brielle, stop! She laughed wildly. Now you want to be a brother? Where was all this moral courage when she was nobody? He flinched, but kept walking slowly. You do not want to do this. I already did. She lifted the tablet. My heart stopped for half a beat. Dana's voice echoed through my phone. Simone, the draft complaint just updated. Brielle smiled through her tears. You thought your money made you untouchable. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Let's see how untouchable you are when the whole world thinks you stole your company from your ex-husband. Marcus's face went white. Brielle, there is no signature. Adrian suddenly went still beside the marshal. Too still. Denise noticed. So did I. Search her purse, I said. Adrian exploded. You have no right. But the marshal was already moving. Adrian tried to twist away, clutching the purse against her side, and that told everyone the truth. The marshal took it from her, opened it, and removed a small plastic sleeve containing Marcus's old passport, a copy of his social security card, and a folded sheet of paper covered in handwritten passwords. Marcus stared at the items like he had been stabbed. Mom. Adrian looked away. Brielle's smile faltered. Denise held up the sleeve. Brielle, step away from the tablet. Brielle's breathing turned ragged. No. Marcus walked closer, ignoring Denise's warning. Brielle, listen to me. She did not steal from me. I stole from her. I stole time, loyalty, safety, dignity. Do not put my name on another theft. Brielle shook her head, sobbing now. You do not understand. If she wins, then everything Mom told us was a lie. Marcus's voice broke. It was. The words hit Brielle harder than any legal threat. Her hand trembled. The tablet lowered an inch. Then Adrian screamed from behind the marshal. Press send, Brielle. The entire driveway froze. There it was, the final mask falling. Brielle looked at her mother in horror. Mom? Adrian's face twisted with desperation. Do it now, before they take everything. For one long second, Brielle stood between the mother who had raised her on status and the truth that had just destroyed it. Then she looked at me, tears shining in her eyes, and whispered, I am sorry. I did not know whether she meant for the past or for what she was about to do. Her thumb moved. Dana shouted through my phone, Simone! The tablet screen flashed. Denise lunged. Marcus shouted Brielle's name. And across every major legal alert system connected to North Star Dominion, a newly filed complaint appeared with the headline Adrian had been waiting 5 years to create. Marcus Whitaker claims ex-wife stole Green Route empire. By 6:17 the next morning, the lie had already learned how to run. It was everywhere. Business blogs, legal gossip accounts, anonymous investor forums, local Dallas news feeds, and the kind of social media pages that pretend to cover finance while feeding on humiliation. The headline kept changing, but the poison stayed the same. Did Simone Carter steal Green Route from her ex-husband? I sat in my home office with the sunrise spreading pale gold across the floor, Lila still asleep upstairs, and watched strangers argue over my life like it was entertainment. Some defended me, some questioned me, some said successful women always rewrite history. Some said Marcus looked like the real founder because men in suits made people feel safer than women with receipts. Dana stood across from my desk, already dressed for war in a navy blazer, her laptop open, her voice clipped and controlled. North Star has not frozen your board authority yet, but their risk committee scheduled an emergency review at noon. I looked at the complaint on the screen. Marcus Whitaker claims ex-wife stole Green Route Empire. Marcus did not file that. His name is on it. Adrian used his documents. Dana nodded. We know that. The problem is public perception does not wait for evidence. My phone had not stopped vibrating for hours. Investors, reporters, North Star executives, former employees, farmers I had helped, people who knew me and people who wanted to know whether they should distance themselves before the fire spread. I had survived poverty. I had survived rejection. But this was different. Poverty attacks your body. Public doubt attacks your name. And a woman can rebuild almost anything except trust once cowards teach the world to question it. Marcus arrived at 7:03 with his attorney and the face of a man who had not slept. I almost refused to let him in, but Dana said we needed his sworn statement before Adrian's team moved again. He walked into my office slowly, his eyes immediately finding the framed photo of Lila on my desk. She was missing two front teeth in the picture, holding a basket of strawberries at one of our partner farms. His face broke for half a second. I didn't know they were going to do that, he said. I stayed seated. That is not enough anymore. I know. He placed a sealed envelope on my desk. This is a signed affidavit. I state clearly that I never founded Green Route, never wrote code, never owned equity, never authorized any complaint, and never claimed you stole anything from me. Dana took the envelope and opened it. We also need a recorded statement. Marcus nodded. I'll do it. I studied him carefully. Why? His eyes lifted to mine. Because 5 years ago I let my mother write the story. I am not letting her write this one. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was something painful about seeing courage arrive late. It did not fix the past. It did not give Lila back the nights she asked why her father forgot pickup again. It did not erase the sunroom. But it still mattered, and I hated that it mattered. Before Dana could start recording, my assistant knocked once and opened the door. Her face was tight. Simone, North Star's CEO, is on line 1. He says it cannot wait. Dana and I exchanged a look. I picked up. This is Simone. Elliot Vance did not waste time. Tell me the complaint is fake. It is fake. Can you prove it before noon? I looked at Dana. She nodded once. Yes. Elliot exhaled, but there was no relief in it. Good. Because the roads matter just became radioactive, and several board members are asking whether your personal history creates a conflict. I felt my jaw tighten. My personal history is why I understand the fraud. That may be true. It may also be exactly how our opponents frame this as revenge. There it was, the clean corporate version of doubt. Elliot, if North Star sidelines me because a forged complaint was filed by people under investigation, you reward the forgery. I know, his voice lowered. But there is something else. Someone leaked an internal memo suggesting Green Route's earliest intellectual property chain was incomplete. Dana went still. Marcus closed his eyes. I said, who leaked it? Unknown. No. Who had access? A pause. Legacy Transition Council, Risk Committee members, and your original acquisition data room. Dana's face changed. The data room was accessed last night? I asked. Elliot did not answer fast enough. Elliot. Yes. At 11:58 p.m. By whom? A temporary legal credential assigned during diligence. Dana's voice cut in. That credential should have expired after closing. It should have, Elliot said. It didn't. I looked at Marcus. He looked terrified, but not guilty. This was bigger than Brielle pressing send in a mansion doorway. Someone with access to North Star's systems was helping them. Dana turned her laptop toward me. Simone, we need to go public first. No, I said. Not with a defensive statement. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? I stood and walked toward the window, watching Lila's swing set move gently in the morning wind. 5 years ago, I defended myself in rooms controlled by people who had already decided I was beneath them. I would not do that again. They want me explaining, I said. They want me pleading, proving, reacting. They want me trapped in their accusation. Dana's eyes sharpened. So what do you want? I turned back toward them. I want a live press conference at Greenroot's first partner farm. Marcus stared. A farm? Yes. The place where the company actually began. Dana slowly smiled. You don't just deny the lie. You show the origin story. Exactly. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message from an unknown number. Dana reached for it, but I opened it first. The clip was only 12 seconds long. Adrian sat in the back of a car, perfectly dressed, perfectly calm, speaking directly into the camera. Simone, sweetheart, by noon everyone will know what you really are. You should have taken the money when I offered it. The video ended. Marcus whispered, She sent that to you? I looked at the screen, then at the frozen image of Adrian's satisfied smile. No, I said quietly. She wanted me to know she is not finished. At that exact moment, Lila appeared in the office doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She looked from me to Marcus to Dana, sensing the tension even before she understood it. Mommy? She asked softly. Why is Grandma Adrian on TV saying you stole something? I felt the room tilt, but I did not let my face change. Lila stood barefoot in the doorway, her curls messy from sleep, her eyes wide with the kind of fear children get when adults try to hide disaster and fail. Marcus looked like someone had punched the air out of him. Dana went silent. For 1 second, all the lawsuits, board calls, leaked memos, and public accusations disappeared. There was only my daughter asking why a grandmother who had ignored her for 5 years was on television calling her mother a thief. I crossed the room and knelt in front of her. Baby, some people are saying things that are not true. Lila's little hand tightened around her stuffed rabbit. Did you steal your company? The question cut deeper than any headline. Not because she doubted me, but because someone had placed the doubt close enough for her to touch. No, I said, holding her gaze. I built it. I built it while you were sleeping beside me, while we lived above the laundromat, while I drove to farms with your car seat in the back. Do you remember, Mr. Alvarez's strawberry fields? She nodded slowly. Greenroot started there? Part of it did. Her chin trembled. Then why would she say that? I looked over her shoulder at Marcus. His eyes were wet. I looked back at Lila. Because sometimes people who cannot take the truth try to make everyone else afraid of it. She thought about that in the serious way children do. Then she whispered, Are we going to lose our house? That was when something inside me hardened completely. Adrian could attack my reputation. She could force North Star into review. She could leak documents, twist history, and send her daughter running into the night with stolen files. But making my child afraid of becoming homeless again was a mistake I would not forgive. I kissed Lila's forehead and stood. No, we are not losing anything. Dana closed her laptop. Then we move now. By 9:30, we were on the road to Alvarez Farms, 2 hours west of Dallas, the place where Greenroot had first proved itself on a real field, with real crops and real people depending on it. Dana coordinated sworn statements. Marcus recorded a video admitting the complaint was fraudulent and stating he had never owned a single line of Greenroot. My original engineers sent time-stamped code commits, farmers sent videos, grocers sent contracts. The truth once gathered had weight, but Adrian had speed. By the time we reached the farm, her accusation had hit national business channels. A panel of strangers debated whether I had hidden assets from my ex-husband. One man in a gray suit said, "This raises serious questions about founder ethics." I turned the screen off before Lila could hear more. Mr. Alvarez was waiting near the packing barn, older now, sun-browned and steady, wearing the same straw hat he had worn the first day. I begged him to test my software. He hugged me without asking permission. Mija, he said softly, tell us what you need. I almost cried then, but there was no time. The truth, he nodded. Then you came to the right place. At 11:40, cameras lined the dirt road outside the farm. Not because I had begged them to come, but because Dana leaked one sentence to the right producer. Simone Carter will answer the ownership allegations from the farm where Green Route began. Reporters love scandal, but they love a stage even more. I stood in front of the old packing barn with Lila safely inside the farmhouse with my mother, Marcus beside Dana, and farmers lined behind me like a wall of living evidence. At exactly noon, while North Star's Risk Committee entered emergency review, I stepped to the microphone. My name is Simone Carter. 5 years ago, I built Green Root with no investors, no family money, and no safety net. Today, a false complaint claims I stole my company from my ex-husband, so I did not come here with outrage. I came here with the people who watched me build it. Mr. Alvarez spoke first, then two farmers, then my first engineer, then Marcus. He stepped forward pale but steady. I was not a founder, he said into the microphones. I was not a partner. I did not write code, create contracts, build relationships, or carry the weight. Simone built Greenroot. And when my mother and sister tried to force her to give it up, I failed her. Today, I am correcting that failure under oath. Phones buzzed across the press line. The narrative shifted in real time. Dana handed reporters certified founder documents, time-stamped repositories, early contracts, divorce filings, and the forensic report tying the forged complaint to Adrian's documents. For the first time all morning, the lie slowed. Then my phone rang. Elliot Vance. I answered on speaker, away from the microphones. Simone, he said, the risk committee reviewed the evidence. I held my breath. And? Your board authority remains intact. Dana closed her eyes in relief. There is more, Elliot said. Compliance traced the leaked North Star memo. It came from someone in our Dallas legal transition office. My stomach tightened. Who? A pause. A contract attorney named Paige Whitaker. Marcus went completely still. I looked at him. Paige? His voice was barely audible. My cousin. Elliot continued. She disappeared from the office 20 minutes ago. Before I could respond, Dana's tablet chimed with a new alert. She looked down, and the color drained from her face. Simone. She turned the screen toward me. A live video had just appeared online. Adrian stood outside North Star Dominion's Dallas headquarters with Brielle beside her and a crowd of reporters in front of them. Adrian looked directly into the cameras and said, if Simone Carter wants the truth, she should explain why her first investor was my son. Then Brielle lifted a folder I had never seen before, stamped with a fake Green Route logo, and the caption beneath the live stream read, Whitaker family releases proof Marcus funded Green Route. For the second time in less than 24 hours, Adrian Whitaker managed to change the conversation before anyone else finished answering the last one. Her live stream spread faster than our press conference ever could, because outrage always outruns evidence. By the time I returned to the farmhouse, every major financial network had split its coverage into two competing stories. One side called me a visionary entrepreneur under attack by a bitter family. The other asked whether Green Route had secretly been funded with marital money that was never disclosed during my divorce. It was exactly what Adrian wanted. Not victory. Confusion. Confusion was cheaper than truth and far more effective. Dana muted the television before Lila could hear another commentator speculate about my integrity. The fake investment file is already circulating, she said. Our forensic team has identified 3 inconsistencies, but it will take a few hours to prove them publicly. I looked at the paused image of Adrian smiling beside Brielle. She doesn't need the documents to survive in court, I said quietly. She only needs them to survive online. Dana nodded. Exactly. Marcus stood near the kitchen window, staring out across the strawberry fields without speaking. Since the press conference ended, he had barely said a word. Shame had become quieter inside him, but heavier. Finally, he turned around. There was never an investment. I know. Every dollar we had went toward rent and hospital bills. I know. He swallowed. The only money I ever gave Green Route was when I paid a $200 server invoice from our joint account because your debit card failed. Dana immediately looked up. When? Marcus frowned, trying to remember. Maybe. 8 years ago. Before Lila was born. She opened her laptop. That matters. I looked at her. Why? Because if Adrian forged a major investment agreement, she'll probably build it around something that actually happened. Marcus closed his eyes. The server invoice. Dana nodded once. A real payment is easier to twist into a fake ownership claim. Before anyone could answer, my phone buzzed again. Elliot Vance. Please tell me you have good news, I said. I have useful news, he replied. Our internal investigation identified the contract attorney who leaked the diligence memo. Paige Whitaker. Yes. Have you found her? No. But we found what she downloaded before disappearing. My stomach tightened. What? Every archived communication between Greenroot and its earliest vendors. Dana muttered under her breath. She's reconstructing the company's birth. Elliot continued. Someone is building a timeline. I walked toward the porch, lowering my voice. To prove ownership? No. He paused. To rewrite it. The distinction chilled me. A false ownership claim could eventually be disproved. A rewritten history could live forever. I looked across the fields where workers were loading fresh produce into trucks running on software I had written years earlier with shaking hands and borrowed laptops. Greenroot had never just been code. It was thousands of ordinary mornings exactly like this one. Yet strangers who had never touched a farm were now debating whether I had stolen the entire idea. Elliot, I asked quietly, why is Adrian escalating this so aggressively? Calvin is finished. Rhodes is collapsing. Why keep fighting? There was silence on the line. Then he said something I had not considered. Maybe this stopped being about Calvin a long time ago. The call ended, leaving that sentence echoing in my mind. Dana stepped onto the porch beside me. You're thinking the same thing I am. She isn't trying to save Calvin. No. Dana folded her arms. She's trying to destroy you. Marcus joined us a moment later. She won't stop, he said. Not unless someone makes her. I studied his face carefully. What aren't you telling me? His expression changed instantly. Dana noticed it too. Marcus looked away toward the fields. Nothing. Marcus. He rubbed both hands together nervously. There is one thing. My pulse slowed. Then say it. About a year after our divorce, Mom asked me to sign several estate planning updates. Dana's attention sharpened. Did you? Most of them. Most? He nodded. One folder looked strange. How? It mentioned Green Route. My entire body went still. What exactly did it say? I don't remember everything. I only remember refusing to sign because it listed your company as a disputed marital asset. Dana stared at him. Marcus. His voice became smaller. I thought Mom's lawyers were just being aggressive. Did you keep a copy? He laughed bitterly. No. Mom took the folder back. Dana closed her laptop with a quiet snap. Then this didn't start yesterday. I already knew she was right. Adrian had been preparing for this for years. While I was expanding Greenroot across Texas, she had been quietly preserving an alternate version of history, one document at a time. My assistant hurried across the gravel driveway carrying another tablet. Simone, she was breathing hard. You need to see this. She handed me the screen. It showed security footage from North Star headquarters taken less than an hour earlier. Paige Whitaker entered the legal archive carrying a banker's box. She signed in normally. She smiled at the receptionist. She left 42 minutes later carrying the same box. But when the footage was slowed frame by frame, something changed. The box was no longer the same size. The bottom had been reinforced with fresh tape. She removed documents, Dana said immediately. Or added them, I replied. Marcus frowned. Why would anyone add documents to an archive? Dana looked at him. Because 10 years from now, investigators trust old files more than fresh memories. Silence settled over us as the meaning landed. Paige wasn't simply stealing records. She was contaminating history itself. My phone vibrated once more. This time it was a secure message from Denise Calloway. Found something. Do not discuss over phone. Come to Dallas immediately. Bring Marcus. Not Adrian. I showed the message to Dana. She read it twice. If Denise is asking for Marcus specifically, she found something connected to the original acquisition. Marcus looked genuinely confused. Why would she need me? I folded the phone into my pocket. We're about to find out. As we walked toward the vehicles, Lila ran out of the farmhouse carrying a folded piece of paper. Mom, I knelt as she handed it to me. A lady left this at the gate. There was no name on the envelope, only my first name written in careful blue ink. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me 8 years earlier sitting at a folding table inside a county farming cooperative, smiling over my laptop while explaining Greenroot's prototype to 3 local growers. Standing in the background, almost hidden behind a support beam, was a woman I had never noticed before. On the back of the photograph, someone had written only one sentence. She was there before anyone else. And she's finally ready to talk. The drive back to Dallas was unusually quiet. Marcus sat in the passenger seat beside Dana, replaying the photograph over and over in his mind. I could tell because every few minutes he glanced at it again, as though the woman standing in the background might suddenly become familiar. I drove behind them, unable to stop thinking about the handwritten sentence. She was there before anyone else. And she's finally ready to talk. Whoever had mailed that photograph had known exactly when to send it. Not before the lawsuit. Not after the investigation. Right now, when history itself had become the battlefield. Denise was already waiting inside North Star's secure legal archive when we arrived. She didn't waste time with greetings. She placed another photograph beside the first one. Same event, she said. Different angle. This time, the mysterious woman was fully visible. She was sitting across from me with a yellow legal pad, listening while I explained the routing algorithm to the farmers. I stared at the image for several seconds before memory slowly returned. Claire, I whispered. Marcus frowned. You know her? Barely. Claire Donovan. She volunteered with the County Agricultural Extension Office for one summer. Denise nodded. She later became a notary public. Dana's eyes widened. A notary? Denise slid another folder across the table. Last night, Claire contacted federal investigators after seeing Adrian's television interview. She says she witnessed something 8 years ago that she believed was unimportant until now. My heartbeat slowed. What? Denise opened the folder. According to Claire, 3 weeks before Greenroot officially launched, Adrian visited the cooperative without telling you. Marcus looked stunned. My mother? Claire remembers because Adrian asked where the young woman building the farming software was working. I tried to picture it but couldn't. That summer had been endless meetings, farm visits, coding sessions, and sleepless nights. Did Claire speak to her? Denise nodded. Briefly. Dana leaned forward. What did Adrian want? Denise looked directly at me. She asked whether there was any paperwork proving who owned the software. The room fell silent. 8 years. Adrian had been planning this for 8 years. Before the divorce. Before Lila was born. Before Greenroot had earned a single dollar. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Dear God, Denise continued. Claire says Adrian offered to notarize some business documents if ownership ever needed to be clarified. Claire refused because no documents existed yet. I felt something cold settle into place. She wasn't reacting to my success, I said quietly. She was preparing in case I ever became successful. Dana nodded slowly. She understood leverage long before she understood technology. Denise reached into the folder one last time. Claire also kept her appointment notebook. She placed a faded spiral planner on the table. A page had been marked with a yellow tab. In careful handwriting beside the date was a single note. Met elegant woman asking about software ownership. Declined request. Strange conversation. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. A record written years before anyone imagined Green Route would matter. Dana smiled for the first time all day. Contemporaneous evidence. Denise nodded. Exactly. Marcus looked up. Will it stop the lawsuit? It will destroy the story behind it, Denise replied. Before anyone could speak again, one of North Star's investigators hurried into the archive carrying a tablet. We found Paige Whitaker. Every head turned. Where? Denise asked. At Love Field Airport. Trying to leave? No. The investigator shook his head. Trying to meet someone. He turned the screen around. Security footage showed Paige standing near a departure gate with a black briefcase. A man approached her wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. The image wasn't clear, but Marcus leaned forward immediately. I know him. Denise looked at him. Who is he? Marcus swallowed hard. That's Douglas Mercer. Dana searched the name on her laptop. Attorney? Marcus nodded slowly. Mom's attorney. Denise's expression hardened. The same attorney who handled your divorce? Yes. Dana looked back at the footage. So this never stopped being a family fight. No, I said quietly. It became a legal business years ago. The investigator zoomed in on the video. Paige handed the briefcase to Mercer. He handed her an envelope. They separated less than 30 seconds later. Can we identify what was inside? Denise asked. Not yet. My phone vibrated. It was Elliot. We've contained the market reaction, he said without preamble. Green Route stock exposure stabilized after Marcus's statement. Good. But Douglas Mercer just requested an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. Dana closed her eyes. He's moving fast, Elliot continued. The filing asks the court to freeze all distributions connected to your acquisition until ownership is resolved. Marcus cursed quietly under his breath. Denise looked at me. We expected this. I nodded. Then we'll be ready. Elliot hesitated. One more thing. Go ahead. The judge assigned to tomorrow's hearing. He stopped. What? I asked. Retired from Whitaker Family Foundation's board 3 years ago. No one spoke. Dana slowly looked toward Denise. Denise looked toward me. Marcus simply whispered, Mom knew. I stood very still, thinking through everything we had learned in the last 24 hours. Adrian had prepared documents for years. She had preserved old records. She had involved Paige. She had kept Douglas Mercer close. Now the first judge assigned to hear the emergency ownership dispute had deep ties to the Whitaker Foundation. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. But after everything else, I no longer believed in convenient coincidences. Denise closed the file. I'll file a motion requesting disclosure of any prior relationships. Dana nodded. And if the judge refuses? Denise answered without hesitation. Then we appeal immediately. Marcus looked at me with quiet determination. Whatever happens tomorrow, I won't let her use my name again. I held his gaze for a moment before nodding once. Then tomorrow, tell the court exactly what you told the cameras. He didn't answer with words. He simply nodded. As we gathered the files, Denise's secure phone rang. She listened for less than 20 seconds before her expression changed. What happened? I asked. She lowered the phone slowly. Claire Donovan was scheduled to give a sworn statement this afternoon. Was? Denise looked directly at me. Someone broke into her house an hour ago. My pulse quickened. Is she alive? Yes. Denise's voice remained calm, but her eyes did not. She's alive. Relief lasted exactly 1 second. But Denise slid the phone into her pocket. The only thing missing from her home was the original appointment notebook.